Story 1. Whatever you do, don't leave the basement. I was sitting on the couch in the basement, scrolling mindlessly through the endless library of content on Netflix when the text came. It had been sent from an unknown number, and read, "Whatever you do, don't leave the basement. Lock the door. Turn off the lights. You are in grave danger. Do not leave the basement." At first, I thought it was a prank text. Some punk texting numbers at random, hoping to scare someone. But at the same time, it was a little strange how they knew I was in my basement. After all, someone who was texting this to random numbers wouldn't be able to tell if the person they were pranking even had a basement. I inadvertently shot a quick glance at the small basement window. Nothing. Not a soul in sight. I decided to ignore the message, figuring whoever it was had simply gotten lucky and had texted someone who happened to be in their basement. However, less than a minute later, I got another text. "It is urgent that you heed this warning. Close and lock the door. Turn off all lights and silence all electronics. And whatever you do, don't leave your basement." I swallowed. Did they know I hadn't shut my door? That I hadn't turned off my lights? I was beginning to feel worried, but a quick glance at the window proved that no one was watching me. Or, at least, that no one was there now. I stood up, turned off the big screen, and stretched. I decided to get a little sleep in before I had to go in for work that night. As I walked up the stairs, however, the text started. My phone began vibrating nonstop, receiving text after text after text. As I reached the top step, I pulled out my phone to see who they were from. The texts had all come from that same unknown number, saying things like, "Do not leave your basement. It is imperative that you stop moving right now and turn off all lights. Your life is in danger. Do not move. Please. This is for your own good. Do not leave the basement." How the hell did they know I was moving? The basement doorway loomed in front of me, showing the dark expanse of my kitchen. I hadn't realized that the sky had become overcast. I cautiously took a step into the kitchen. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. Whoever was texting had to be playing some sort of prank, though I wasn't finding it very funny. The floorboard creaked beneath my foot as I stepped out into the kitchen. Suddenly, a flash of lighting lit up the gray sky, and almost immediately, the rumble of thunder followed. I shivered, but continued to walk. Then, I heard a loud creak. However, this time, it didn't come from under my foot. In fact, it didn't come from a floorboard at all. This creak came from my door. The sound was the unmistakable noise of the front door opening slowly, as if whoever was opening it was attempting to do it quietly. As soon as the door opened, I got another text. I didn't bother to get out my phone, just leaped down into my basement and closed the door. I locked it, then strung the chain, and even carried a heavy chair up to barricade the door, but I still didn't feel safe. I carefully crept down the stairs and sat down on an old chair, pulling my phone out of my pocket to read the last few texts. The first one read, "For God's sake, please don't leave." The most recent one read, "Now you have been chosen. Do not trust anyone. And don't leave the basement." I've been chosen? What the hell does that mean? Finally, I did what I should have done in the first place. I texted the unknown number back. "Listen, I don't know what's going on and I'm not sure that I want to find out. Please just leave me the hell alone. I don't want to be a part of any of this." They didn't respond. Suddenly, I heard a sound coming from behind the basement door. A creak. The sound of pressure being placed upon a floorboard. Then, I heard the sound of the doorknob being jiggled. I froze. It jiggled again. And again. Every small noise coming from beyond the locked door of the basement filled me with terror, paralyzing me with horror. I looked around the small basement for anything that could remotely be considered a weapon. The room was, unfortunately, mostly empty, with the closest thing to a self-defense tool being the remote for the TV. I grabbed it and crouched down in the corner of the room. My breathing felt too loud. My head felt like it was spinning. The cold basement seemed to close in around me. I started imagining sounds. At least, I thought I was imagining them. I began hearing footsteps, voices, whispers. They echoed around me. I heard yells coming from outside my house. Then screams. Then silence. After what felt like an hour, the sounds stopped. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe it was all in my head after all. Then, I heard a knock on the basement window. As previously mentioned, the basement window is small. In fact, I could barely see out of it. However, I was able to catch a glimpse of something outside darting past it. I mustered up every last drop of courage in me and weakly yelled, "Who's there?" A few moments of silence followed, then a voice replied, "Oh, just a traveler seeking shelter from the storm." The voice sounded male, and somewhat strained, like he was speaking through gritted teeth. Who the hell would be out here in the middle of the rain? I live in a rural area in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any neighbors, and the nearest grocery store is half an hour's drive away. Something was wrong. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you in." "Why not?" the voice replied, this time a hint of anger in it. I didn't reply. The texts and the sounds in my house seemed a little too real to be a part of some elaborate prank. Instead, I shifted a little to my right, just out of view from the window for anyone looking inside the house from the yard. Thank God I did that, because a few seconds after I did, something leaned over and peered into the dark basement. It's impossible to describe the thing in the window, simply because I could hardly see it. The dust and dirt combined with the size of the window made it difficult to make out what was staring at me. All that I could see were two solid red eyes looking around inside my basement. Two small, black pupils glanced around, attempting to find me. I placed my head between my knees, and tried to steady my breathing. It's been 48 hours since then. I've been living off of the potato chips and energy drinks down in my basement. I'm running out, and I know soon, I'll have to leave to get more food. I've spent the past couple of days sitting in the dark, listening to the sounds of footsteps and knocking on my doors. It's maddening, but there's nothing I can do. I've tried calling the cops, and I've tried calling the place I work at. I have a signal, but for some reason, it never works. No one ever picks up. I'm terrified, and I don't know what to do. Story 2. Mommy sleeps in the basement. Speak louder, please. I put my hand up next to my ear from the back of the room, signaling that she would need to raise her voice. She took a deep breath. I could see anxiety turning her cheeks beet red, as strands of blonde hair began to fall out of the same nappy ponytail she wore every day. There was something about her so familiar, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. With her face glued to the paper, too afraid to make eye contact, she quickly sputtered out, "Hi, my name is Paisley Jackson, and this is my poem called My Family." Paisley was a shy little girl. In fact, she was one of the quietest students I ever had in my 10 years of teaching. Which I guess being the youngest of 11 will do that to anyone. Surprisingly, she was very smart, unlike the rest of her siblings who were dumber than a box of rocks. Lord, the Jackson kids were such a headache, except for Paisley, of course. I just wish I could have given her more opportunities to improve her future. Don't get me wrong, I tried to help Paisley, I really did. I gave her clothes, food, and even had funds lined up for her. But, living dirt poor in a shack out in the middle of the desert, was a bad hand to be dealt in life. Besides, no matter what I did, it wouldn't have made a difference. Everyone knows that the cycle of poverty is almost impossible to break. I crossed my legs, pen in hand, preparing for yet another bland story about a family I'd never get to meet. If you've ever worked with underprivileged kids, you'd know that guardian involvement is quite rare. When it came to interest in their daughter's education, Paisley's parents were no exception. I have two mommies. One named Betty who can make good spaghetti. I call her Mom, she's the one that's married to my dad Tom. One named Claire with pretty yellow hair. I call her Mommy, Dad calls her his project, his hobby. Being smack dab in the middle of Utah, I've seen hundreds of polygamist families, so this didn't strike me odd. Besides, even though polygamy is illegal, I try to keep my nose in my own business. Mom takes care of us all. She can do that because she's so tall. Mommy wears a pretty silver bracelet. She wears it because she's so famous. Wouldn't be the first time I saw kids coming up with stories about celebrity parents to add excitement to their ordinary lives. I just didn't expect it to come from Paisley. Mommy has me and Tommy. He's one of my older brothers. Mom is a lot older. She has all the others. I cringed. That meant that one of Paisley's mothers had given birth to 9 children. I couldn't imagine going through that many pregnancies. Dad says me and Tommy are a gift from God. He'll never hit us with a rod. His pride and joy is Tommy, but he says the only person he truly loves is Mommy. I looked up from my grade book, with the line about a rod catching my attention. However, this wasn't the first time one of my students have accidentally reported abuse. Truth is, CPS picks and chooses who they want to help. Mom is having another baby. She's mad Dad wants to name it Daisy. Mommy can't have no more kids. Her last one died of SIDS. Shifting in my seat, I scribbled down a note reminding myself to deliver my daughter's old baby clothes to the Jackson Shack. As a mother myself, I know babies can be expensive. Dad says she did it on purpose, because she wanted to run off and join the circus. Mom says it wasn't her fault. I promised to keep that secret in the me and her vault. I shook my head in sadness. How could someone blame a grieving mother for something she couldn't control? Mommy was the one Dad chose. He watched all of her school shows. They were joined in the night. Daddy says inside her is a lot of fight. Mom is just a cover. Dad doesn't really love her. I threw my hand up, a gesture meaning stop I had taught my students, but Paisley didn't look up. She continued to read, oblivious to my disappointed frown. Obviously one of her siblings put her up to this as a joke. Mommy says she needs to get out. She wants to show me what life is all about. Dad gets mad, it's his biggest pet peeve. Mommy is sad, she just wants to leave. Mommy sings to me her favorite song. Mom says Dad's head is wired wrong. Shaking my head, I sighed. Another child with so much potential, and such a kind heart, was stuck in the middle of a lover's quarrel that didn't even involve her. Last birthday, I wanted to take Mommy to see her favorite basketball team. Mom made me a cake with frosted buttercream. I gotta go see the Knicks, but Dad said he made a mistake he couldn't fix. Nothing is the same anymore. I don't know why for sure. Now Dad cries at night alone. He asks God, what have I done? To Mom he no longer tends, she hopes the baby will make amends. Paisley rose her head up with a smile, looking for my approval. Although I was appalled at the inappropriateness of her poem, I didn't want to break her spirits. She clearly was very proud of it, and scolding her for something that wasn't her wrongdoing, was just going to send that little girl back into her shell that I'd been trying to break for months. So instead, I clapped, making the rest of the class, who were too young to understand the gravity of the situation, applaud too. Mrs. June, I brought a picture of Mommy for extra credit. It's got one more part of the poem. Can I show the class? I nodded my head, thinking there couldn't possibly be any details worse than what she already presented. Paisley reached into the front pocket on her old worn-out hand-me-down dress, pulling out an old aging photo. She flipped the flaking picture around, displaying it as if it were her most prized possession. My blood ran cold. I finally figured out why Paisley looked so familiar to me. In what seemed to be a school photograph, smiling ear to ear exactly like Paisley, was a young woman by the name of Claire Daisy. She was a high school student, popular for her ability to gain the lead in every school play, that went missing without a trace 12 years prior. She was last seen leaving theater practice late one night, but then she just vanished. No sign of a struggle. No witnesses. No evidence. No body. Nothing. Her case was covered on every news station in Utah for a while, because of how peculiar it was, until people lost interest. Paisley happily continued, I was so in shock I couldn't stop her, as she read off the back of the picture. There is one thing I don't understand. and maybe you'll have the answer at hand. If Dad's love for Mommy will never sway, why did he treat her that way? Mom lays her head on a nice soft bed. But Mommy sleeps in the basement, under a big slab of cement. Story 3. Since I was little, I've always lived with my grandmother. My mother divorced while I was very little but remarried shortly after. Due to their financial situation, my grandmother turned her garage into a place for my mom and husband to stay in until they could get on their feet and get a house. There wasn't enough room for me there, so I kept staying at Grandma's house. My mom and stepdad got their finances in order and bought a new house. I was already attached to the neighborhood and had a few friends, so I was asked whether I wanted to move with them or not. I chose not to and finished the rest of my schooling living at Grandma's house. I moved out for a while with some acquaintances, but that fell through after about a year. I needed to move again and thought this would be the perfect time to finally live with my mom for a little while and get to know both my mom and stepdad better. Back then I was just dating my wife and planned on getting married as soon as we were able to save up the cash for our wedding, so it wasn't going to be a very long time. We figured it would be quickest if we stayed living with our parents so we could fund the wedding ourselves without incurring any debt in addition to our school loans. My sister had gone away to college, so I was able to crash in her old room, in the basement. The basement had a really nice setup. You would walk down the open stairway from upstairs, and to your left was a door that led into the basement. To the right was another door that led to the laundry room with a bathroom, an extra refrigerator, and the door to my room. To the left was the entertainment room and wet bar my stepdad had built. It was a really nice setup with surround sound that I've watched plenty of action movies on when I'd come over to visit. I got my stuff set up on a Friday night, pretty impressed I was able to get it all moved in a single day. I was pretty beat and quickly fell asleep. The next day, roughly middle to late afternoon, I was coming downstairs to go to my room and play some video games when I stopped at the entrance to the basement. I looked left toward the wet bar, where there was an empty space with an old rocking chair. The room was dimly lit by the sunlight pouring in through the basement doorway. The rocking chair didn't move or anything like that, but I just had this eerie feeling that something was over there. I didn't feel as though whatever was there was staring at me. I could just feel a presence in the room. I really didn't like it. I moved through the laundry room and into my room and closed the door. I decided on being stupid, played some video games and forgot all about it. It must have been roughly 1 a.m. when I decided to go to bed. My parents typically stayed up until 3 and 4 a.m. so I could still hear them clicking away on their laptops upstairs, playing casual games together into all hours of the night as I headed to the bathroom outside my room to brush my teeth. My mother noted that it can be pretty hard to wake up in the morning with the door to the laundry room and my room shut since the sunlight won't pour in. Knowing this, I'd left the laundry room door open. As I walked past the laundry room door that leads out to the entertainment room, I could feel the presence again. It was definitely more pronounced this time. I could feel the hairs standing up on the back of my neck. I quickly moved into the bathroom and shut the door. I finished up my nightly duty and bolted back to my room, only a few feet away. I shut my bedroom door and contemplated leaving it closed. I really hated not waking up on time in the morning, and I know I won't if the room stays permanently dark because the door is blocking any sunlight from coming in. I cracked the door open, not too wide but wide enough that the sunlight will shine through in the morning, turned my box fan on low and crawled into bed. I've always been kind of paranoid, so I made sure when I set my room up that my bed faced the door, feet pointing toward the same wall so I can look out of the room. I closed my eyes and tried to fall asleep, making sure I was tucked in toward the wall, as far from the door and edge of the bed as possible. After a couple of minutes, I could feel it again. I'm being watched. I cracked my right eye open, ever so slightly so I don't look awake should it be true that I am being watched. My door was open much farther now, almost all the way. Likely this was due to the fan blowing, I thought to myself, but I was still uneasy. I opened my eyes slowly, watching the darkness slowly shift and flow while my eyes tried to adjust to the inky blackness. I simply could not see through the darkness. I could feel the presence now, the feeling of not just being watched, but someone or something being there was now stronger than ever, just beyond my doorway. I closed my eyes again and tried to remain calm. I'm being stupid, I thought to myself. I've never been scared of the night before, why would I be now? As I tried to mentally psyche myself out so I could get some damn sleep, I felt the presence shift. I kept my eyes shut, for I wished not to know what lay beneath the veil of night. The formless void crept into my room slowly, moving itself across the room corner to my bed. The presence remained there for a long time, all the while I dared not move, afraid I would garner more attention from the presence. After what seemed like an eternity, the presence began to shift and move to other parts of my room, yet never coming any closer to my bed. I pushed myself to ignore whatever I was feeling and busied my thoughts with video games and what I would be doing the next day. After a short while I was able to drift into a dreamless slumber. From then on, every night I could feel this presence watch me from just outside my doorway. Always coming in for a time and shifting around my room, never coming close to me. I got used to it, thinking I was either just acting like a child or the stress of the wedding planning was forcing my mind to play tricks on me. Even though I was convinced of these facts, I never opened my eyes when I felt the presence come in, nor do I sleep without my back facing the wall. This had gone on for roughly 8 months before I simply got tired of it. I was tired of feeling this presence watching me, hating the eerie feeling it gave me. I decided that enough was enough, and even though I was worried I'd sleep too late without sunlight helping to wake me up in the morning, so I left my door closed for the night. I kept my same sleeping position, back against the wall, just in case. For a few minutes it seemed like the feeling wouldn't present itself, but shortly after I convinced myself of the fact, I could feel the presence again just beyond the doorway waiting in the laundry room. I felt a little more secure in that I knew it couldn't see me anymore, but I still didn't like the fact that I could feel it waiting, lingering in the shadows, just outside my door. The next night I decided to not only close my door, but also close the laundry room door that led out to the entertainment room and upstairs. It didn't help much. That night I could feel the presence lurking in the entertainment room, pacing around the wall and door that separated me from the rest of the basement. It was still unsettling, but the feeling was lessened enough that I was able to sleep much better. I began to shut both doors at night, but this came at a heavy price. I no longer woke up to my alarm on time, sometimes hours late for work. This wouldn't do, so I decided to buy one of those outdoor light timers to turn my standing lamp on across the room at a certain time. This worked for about a week or so, but the timing quickly became off. No matter how many times I set it to the correct time, it would either go off way too early, way too late, or not at all. I decided it was time to just man up, open both doors, and let the sunlight help wake me up again. As soon as I turned my light out, the presence returned. It felt stronger than ever, as if it were infuriated that I shut it out of my room. However, the presence still stayed across the room from my bed, so I just forced myself to fall asleep each night, ignoring the presence lurking in the pitch-black corners of my room. In a fit of rebellion against the presence, I began shutting the doors on weekends when I could afford to accidentally sleep in. Of course, the presence did not enjoy this decision of mine one bit. After a few weeks of shutting the thing out on weekends, the one thing I had hoped would never happen began to occur. The presence began to move closer to my bed. It was a Tuesday night when it first started. It moved, ever so slightly, from its preferred corner to the middle of the room. For the next few nights, it stayed in the center of the room and stopped roaming the opposite wall. The weekend was pretty peaceful. I didn't even feel it roaming the entertainment room the whole weekend. It was as if the presence scared itself by getting too close. That Sunday night though, everything changed. As I turned the light out, preparing for the inevitable presence to come waltzing back into my room, it came quicker than it ever has before. It didn't go across the room to its usual spot or to the middle of the room. It came closer than ever before, just my nightstand in between it and myself. I was definitely frightened and couldn't think. All I could do was remain motionless and let the void drink me in, eyes shut tight. After a few minutes, unsure of the actual span of time, the presence moved to the foot of my bed. The presence didn't stay still. I could feel it constantly shifting at the foot of my bed, pacing back and forth. I knew not how I could even attempt to sleep feeling what seemed like contempt or possibly hatred, coming from the foot of my bed. Thankfully, the presence calmed itself and moved back to the center of the room for the rest of the night. I only had to put up with this for another few weeks as my wedding date was approaching fast. I was very much ready to be rid of my parents' home. Whatever is in their basement is becoming too much for me to handle. Over the course of the few weeks leading up to my wedding, the presence would always come quickly and hover near my bed, and at the foot of my bed. I slept less, ate less, and was becoming generally unpleasant to be around with this presence haunting me, compounding with the stress of the wedding. It was my second to last night being at my mother's house when I decided I wanted to know what was coming into my room. I don't know why it never occurred to me before. I dug through some old stuff of mine from when I was a child my mother had laying around in a closet and grabbed a night light. I plugged that bastard in over by the corner the presence used to hang out at. Now I'd be able to see, even if it was only a little bit, what was entering my room. I also wondered if it even would enter due to the fact a light was on, but, with this nightmare almost over, I was feeling braver than ever. It was about 2 a.m. when I decided to go to sleep, so I plugged the night light in and hesitated at opening my door. There was no going back from this. Once I turn my light out, either that presence will rush in, or it won't, choosing to shy away from the night light. I breathed deeply, opened both doors and darted for my bed. I, again, hesitated turning my light out. I still had a chance to back out. I didn't have to work the next morning because it was the day before the wedding. I could still close both doors and sleep soundly. I mulled over this thought for a minute or two and ultimately decided that if I didn't do it now, I'd never know. I turned the light out and for the first time, kept my eyes open while drawing the covers up around me as close as possible. I couldn't see yet as my eyes had not adjusted to the dim lighting. I could already feel the presence outside my doorway, waiting in the laundry room. My eyes began to cut through the shadows, and I could see the void had a shape. It was squat, sat low to the ground, but I couldn't see a full outline of the thing. I was terrified, never actually believing something would actually be there. I didn't budge and just stared at the thing, obscured by the darkness of the laundry room. I couldn't help myself and closed my eyes tight. I debated whether I'd open them or not for a good long while, but I knew for sure I wasn't going to move a muscle. I decided to peek again, and what I saw still chills me to my core this day. The squat creature I could now see was actually just crouched down with its hands placed on the floor between its feet, sitting in the middle of my room. I looked directly into its wide, unblinking eyes, completely horrified that my mother was crouched on the floor staring intently at me, her head cocked to the side with a tiny grin on her face. Her curly, dark blonde hair was disheveled and all over the place. Had this been going on for over a year? My mother staring creepily at me while I slept? Did she do this to my sister? Was she possessed? A million questions raced through my mind in the span of seconds, but as quickly as I discovered it had been my mother watching me the entire time, she began to move out of the room. She slowly shifted her hands and feet, keeping them close to the floor, moving sideways to keep staring at me with her insane glare. She paused again at my doorway for the longest minute in my life and then vanished into the darkness of the laundry room. I couldn't feel her creepy stare coming from the laundry room. She must have moved on back to the entertainment room or straight back upstairs. I really hoped it was back upstairs, but I wasn't brave enough to find out yet. If my mom was crazy or something, I'd rather not provoke her. Who knows what she would do in that state of mind. I checked the time on my phone and it had been over an hour since she left my room and I'd stopped feeling her presence. I clicked my light on and sat up in bed. I thought maybe it'd be best to at least check on her, see if she did make it back to bed, or not. That's how you die in horror movies, I thought. I could see into the laundry room and knew she wasn't hiding in there, so I thought it best to at least close the doors. She never bothered to open them before. I got up and slowly made my way over to the laundry room door. Not thinking about it, I glanced out into the entertainment room and could see my mother, crouched in the same position on the far side of the room by the rocking chair, staring intently at me in the doorway. She kept tilting her head back and forth slowly, never breaking eye contact. I froze, a brand new wave of terror keeping me bolted to the floor. My mother began to shuffle toward me, tilting her head back and forth all while, her smile now wide and seemingly menacing. I shut the door before she could reach me, ran into my room and locked the door. I heard a thud as she slammed into the door. Once, twice, 3 times she slammed against the door. I was stricken with fear, gripping onto a pair of wooden nunchucks I bought from a flea market when I was younger. I couldn't hit my mother, could I? Either way, it made me feel safer. The thumping on the laundry room door stopped. A minute later I could hear the creak of the hinges as the door slowly opened. The handle of my door began to turn back and forth, trying to push open the door. I sat up the entire night with the light on, quivering in the corner of my room watching the door handle twist left and right. Around roughly 6 in the morning, the handle stopped turning. I waited until 9 o'clock, making sure it was daytime out before I unlocked the door and ventured out of the room. I peeked out into the laundry room. She wasn't there. Still gripping my nunchucks, I peeked around the now wide-open door to the entertainment room and she wasn't there either. I peeked a 3rd time around the corner of the door that leads to the stairwell and she wasn't there. I breathed a sigh of relief and walked upstairs to the living room and kitchen area. My mother was sitting in her usual seat at the dining room table, eating a bowl of cereal. "Good morning, how'd you sleep?" she asked in her usual chipper tone. "Fine, I guess. Did you get up at all last night?" She finished chewing the wad of cereal in her mouth and swallowed. "No, I didn't get up." "Why do you ask?" "Nothing, I just thought I heard something in the laundry room," lying right to her face. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, why were you trying to kill me or something last night and staring at me while I slept every night since I've lived here?" "Oh okay, it could have just been the house settling. You hear most everything in that basement," she said, shoveling in another mouthful of cereal. "Yeah, it was probably nothing," I said, lying again. I let her get back to eating and I began preparing for a long day ahead, getting everything ready for the wedding Saturday. All day I couldn't shake the feeling of what had happened out of my mind. It wasn't a dream. I mean, I never went to sleep. I didn't have the chance to dream. Nevertheless, I still had one night left in that house and decided I need a backup plan. I asked my best friend and best man to stay the night with me, using the excuse that I needed help waking up in the morning and staying on task for the wedding. I didn't dare tell him about what had happened with my mother, partly because I didn't want to scare him, and partly because I wasn't sure of it myself. It was just too surreal. We stayed up somewhat late, laughing and joking about the stupid things we did in high school and played video games. He crashed on the floor and I'd forgotten all about last night. I was completely exhausted and crashed into bed. I waited to fall asleep for a while, wondering if my mother was going to make a repeat appearance with my friend there. She never did. I couldn't feel her presence in the entertainment room either. I fell asleep quickly, assured the presence of my friend was keeping whatever my mother was doing in check. The wedding went off without a hitch. It was the best time of my life. My wife and I drove to Kansas City and stayed for close to a week, having a blast on our honeymoon. I thought nothing of the events that had transpired only a few days before and had completely forgotten the entire event until it came time to open our wedding gifts. We poured out the box of cards that had been given to us and were slowly making our way through them, making a list of what each person had given for writing thank you notes. I opened the card my mother gave us. It was one of those cards that had a pocket for money. I read the message written on the left of the card and pulled the money out of the pocket. A small slip of folded paper fell to the floor. My wife hadn't noticed, so I picked up and unfolded the note. In the note was scrawled in big thick messy letters, "I'll always be with you." I quickly folded the note back up and threw it into the trash pile. My wife didn't need to know, and if I told her the story of what happened, she'd just be frightened of the darkness at night. So I kept the story and what was written in the note to myself. A week later I woke up in our apartment one night in a cold sweat, my wife sleeping soundly beside me. I was feeling thirsty and got up for a drink of water from the kitchen. I made my way into the kitchen and poured a tall, cold glass. As I drank, I heard something shuffle outside by the front door. I didn't think anything of it, it was probably the neighbor across from me. Then the door handle started to twist. Back and forth the handle moved, squeaking lightly with each turn. I looked out the peephole but no one was there. I closed the peephole and grabbed the handle to keep it from turning. I could feel the pressure of someone trying to twist the handle back and forth on the other side of the door. After a moment, they stopped trying to turn the handle. I looked out the peephole again and saw my mother, crouched low to the ground, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes, and that menacing grin. Story 4. I naturally fell into babysitting around the age of 14. Through friends and family, I got leads for babysitting to score some cash, which definitely beat having to work at a restaurant. The job had its ups and downs, but overall it wasn't a bad gig at all. Yet, as many good experiences as I had, they were all eclipsed by one night. A new family in town talked to my dad at work and it turned out that they needed a babysitter. I happily took the job and found myself watching their 10-year-old boy a couple of weeks later. There was nothing out of the ordinary about the family themselves. They were the model citizens of suburban America, complete with the white picket fence and blue shutters. Nothing about their house was strange or even unique. Their son Avery was very mild-mannered and polite. Even their car was basic. Not that these were bad things, but I expected it to be a very boring night. What I did not expect was the uncomfortable, inexplicable feeling that I got when I set foot in the house. A chill ran through me, but there was no draft. I rubbed my arms as I gazed at their staircase as we passed. They gave me a brief tour of the house before they left a note of instructions and all the usual information I expected from a job. While trying to figure out what was making me so uneasy about the place, I noticed something about their basement door when I passed it. A padlock was placed on the door, along with a deadbolt in place. Any questions? The father asked as my mind was pulled out of my curiosity. No, sir. Everything looks great. So they left and Avery and I played some games before I made dinner. A couple of times, I thought I heard Avery call me into the den. Both times, I found him sitting on the couch in what most recognize as the TV zombie state. He denied having called me, and I went back to making dinner. After the third time, I told Avery it wasn't funny and that he should stop. I'm not doing anything, I'm just watching TV. His voice went to that higher tone of pleading, sounding desperate for me to believe him. Avery, I know it's my first time and sometimes you want to test things out, but I'm trying to get dinner ready, so if you call me again, I'm not checking on you, okay? I didn't say anything. The child glared at the TV with a pouting face, and I began to feel bad. As many times as I've heard lies, I was starting to sense that he was telling the truth. So what was I hearing? Hey, it's fine. I'm not mad. Promise. Avery turned his head back towards me, seeming to test if I was the one fibbing now. How about I let you stay up a little later if we forget about it? Do you really promise? Pinky promise. With our contractual pinkies interlocked, spirits were raised again and I was able to finish dinner. Although I didn't finish without hearing Avery's voice calling me once more. I ignored it, and when Avery didn't mention it at dinner I figured it was him fooling around again. The whole time we chatted as we ate, I couldn't help but feel that something was not right about this house. As hard as I tried to not look, my eyes kept diverting to the heavy padlock and chain on the basement door. Curiosity got the best of me, and as we were cleaning up, I couldn't help but ask. So Avery, what's the deal with the basement door? What do you mean? His words did not match his demeanor. It was obvious he didn't make eye contact as he forced his sentence out. Come on, you know what I mean. The padlock, chain, and deadbolt. Y'all have dangerous chemicals down there? Avery's face grew paler and he stared at the wall for a moment. Hey, it's okay. You don't have to tell me. I didn't mean to. Dad said no one can talk about it anymore. This really threw me off, and I couldn't possibly finish my sentence now. A thick veil of tension materialized between us. So you guys aren't allowed to talk about it? Avery shook his head. Ah, okay. That's cool. No big deal. It was nothing but a big deal. Was their dad doing something illegal down there? Or was it something strange that no one could do anything about it? Maybe their dad was in denial about something going on. There were way too many questions going through my head now. Hey, how about we put on a movie? Yeah, sure. What am I saying? Everyone likes movies, right? Now excited, we decided on a fun movie that quickly pulled our minds away from the mysterious basement door. Well, that's not entirely true. Maybe Avery was distracted, but it was killing me. As we ate popcorn, I couldn't help but watch Avery, wondering what was going on in that little head of his. Was there something awful going on in the house and there was nothing I could do to stop it? Or maybe the dad was just... Stop, I told myself inwardly. Mulling over it all endlessly was not doing myself any favors. So the movie ended, and I ushered the drifting child to his bed. Now, the house was all to myself until 12, so I had a good 3.5 hours to myself. Immediately, I began texting my friend to tell her all about the weird experience I was having that night. She dismissed it, saying that I was getting spooked by a new place. This annoyed me to no end. I'd been at bigger, way creepier looking houses but never got weird vibes like this. Then, I heard it. Stephanie. I went instantly still and listened intently. You didn't hear that, Steph. Just keep texting your friend in. Stephanie E. There was no mistaking it this time. It was definitely coming from the basement. The acoustics couldn't have been from Avery upstairs. The voice sounded like a little girl's. In fact, I'm not even sure he could make his voice like that, anyway. Slowly, I stood up from the couch and approached the door. Maybe like earlier, I was just hearing things. Maybe being creeped out by the house was starting to mess with my head. That made sense, right? Stephanie? I jumped back from the door, almost wetting myself in the process. There was no way I could dismiss it as anything else now. There was a little girl's voice coming from the basement. Hello? I responded. I couldn't keep my voice from shaking. Is this Stephanie? Why yes, it's Stephanie. Can you help me? Who are you? Why are you locked in the basement? My name is Meredith Rosenberg. They're kept me locked up for a long time now. The police were almost onto them and that's why they moved. Can you get me out? A cold shock washed over me and made it hard to respond. Was I actually babysitting for a family that kept a little girl prisoner? Oh my God, how long have you been locked up with them? Ever since I can remember. I felt somehow hot and cold at the same time, and wanted to throw up. This all made sense now with what Avery had told me. Of course his father didn't want him talking about the door. I just need to find the keys and I can. They're hidden in the garage underneath the metal shelf. It's inside a magnetic key holder. Okay, just hold tight. In a panic to free the poor girl, I darted into the garage and began feeling the space underneath the bottom shelf, and sure enough, there was a magnetic key holder there. Running back, I popped the key holder open and began to insert the key into the padlock. Did you find it? Yes, sweetie. I'm almost there. Oh, please hurry. Sometimes they come home early. This sent me into even more of a rush, and I barely managed to fumble the key into the padlock. I finally heard the successful click of the padlock, pulled the chain off, and slid the deadbolt to the right. I'm coming, Meredith. Hold on. I turned the doorknob and threw open the door, only to be met with darkness. Now full of adrenaline, my hands felt around for the light switch. Finally finding my purchase, I flicked the light on, which lit up most of the stairs. Meredith? I called out. Unless I was remembering it wrong, it sounded like her voice was just on the other side of the door a minute ago. In fact, it was quite strange that she wasn't waiting for me at the top of the stairs. Wouldn't you immediately run out of a basement that you were locked in for God knows how long? I'm down here. The little girl's voice called out. Judging from the distance, it sounded like she was calling from somewhere at the bottom of the stairs. My brain suddenly began piecing all the details of this interaction together, and the idea of going down into the basement became absolutely terrifying. Meredith, you can come up now. The door's open. I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. Why I was scared of a little girl was beyond me, but much like the house itself, something felt very wrong here. I hurt my leg, ow ow. When you said you were getting the key, I went back down to get some of my things and got hurt. Ah. Her sounds of pain filled me with sorrow, but an invisible force was holding me back from taking another step into that basement. Can you move? Maybe pull yourself up on the railing? I can't. It hurts too bad. Okay, sweetium. What's wrong? Won't you help me? It's just really dark down there and I don't want to get hurt too. Is there any way you can get to the stairs? Any way at all? I tried to sit up, but my shoulder hurts too much. I thought you said your leg got hurt. The words hung in the air like a noose. It was only after I said it that I realized there was several things seriously wrong about all of this. A question popped into my head I didn't even have time to think about until now. How did she know where the padlock key was? A deathly silence took up the space between me and wherever this girl was. It was a standoff, and I couldn't think of anything else to say. There were questions I could ask her to figure out what was happening, but I felt that her answers weren't going to be honest. Perhaps at this point, the truth was too frightful to know. Meredith? Are you still there? It was a stupid question, but it was the only thing my mind could conjure. The additional silence only unnerved me, so I decided to try and get a better look. Fishing my phone out of my pocket, I clicked on the flashlight. It didn't do me any good because of the awful range, so I did the one thing I'd already told myself not to do. I took a step forward. Maybe it was the angle of the stairs or the lighting, but that one step gave me more information than I ever wanted to know. I caught a better view of the bottom step, which was essentially a ledge into a black abyss. Something looked different on this step, but it took a second to register what it was. The step was wet, a pool of some unknown liquid overflowing into the darkness of the basement. I knew for sure that the father hadn't mentioned any flooding, so it would be way too random for that. So I stood there, watching in frozen curiosity as the puddle then suddenly rippled, and I realized the abominable truth. It wasn't water. It was a puddle of saliva, and something was drooling into it from the dark. A wretched chuckle emanated from the horrid void beyond the step, and it cemented me even further into place. It was a wet chortle, and positively evil. How did you like my voices? The thing said from the dark. I've been practicing. The epiphany creeped down my spine. It was now talking in Avery's voice. Everything in my body screamed at me to run. I heard the screams, but I couldn't respond no matter how hard I tried. A pity though, almost got you. At this, the most gruesome face peeled back the shadows and revealed itself, along with its unearthly mandibles and small fountain of saliva. My faculties finally came to and I threw myself into the house and kicked the door closed. In mere seconds, I had the door bolted and chained. Leaning against the door, my chest heaved as I struggled to catch my breath. Just as I felt I was safe, the door shuddered as a terrible blow rocked it. I screamed and ran upstairs to grab Avery. I practically dragged the poor kid out the door and called the police. It wasn't until the operator came on that I realized I was about to report a monster in the house. Thinking quickly, I told them that I heard a burglar in the home. It wasn't long before the police and Avery's parents came home. Nothing was found, even in the basement, but I didn't even care at that point. I just wanted the hell out of that house and away from whatever that thing was. Avery's parents kept glancing at me funny the whole time, probably because they knew I had their basement key. I shoved it into their hands before I hugged Avery and got into my car to drive home. That poor kid has to live in that house with that thing, but there was nothing I could do about it. As long as I am alive, I will never, ever set foot in that house again. And as for basements go, I can't go into them anymore. I just simply can't. Story 5. My work requires that I often go on business trips. I like the job. I like meeting new people. I like visiting new cities. But for this story, that's neither here nor there. I just arrived in Chicago and settled down in a place that you could probably call high class. I'd personally never shell out the exorbitant funds required for these sorts of things, but if the company's paying, then I won't complain. One night, I'd come back, drunk as hell after a night out with clients. At some point during the AM hours, I went into the bathroom and slipped on some water, falling into the wall space between the toilet and the shower. I stuck out my arm, but it actually went straight through. I wasn't sure why such a fancy place used such fragile materials for their rooms, but this oddity really didn't seem right. The fall wasn't that hard. I couldn't understand how it broke so easily. I stepped back, staring at the gaping, newly formed hole. Now, I wasn't exactly sure how hotels were designed in relation to how much space there is between the rooms, but I was under the assumption that they were built side by side. If that was the case, then there must have now been a hole in my neighbor's closet or something, which was rather concerning. It was late as hell, so I decided to wait until the morning to tell them about it, so they didn't freak out and think I was some weird asshole making holes in the walls. Morning comes and I knock on their door. They open up and are mostly understanding about what had happened. They take around each of their rooms, but there's no hole anywhere. All right, I thought to myself. Don't have to worry about anything there. But I still had to tell the front desk or something. I wasn't really prepared to pay for the damages, though. Stop being so fucking cheap with your building, you know? However, I decided to put it off until after all my work was done. I come back the following night and take a look at the hole again. It really was big. Out of curiosity, I took my phone flashlight and shined it through. If this didn't lead to a room, then what was it? Just random space in between? The first thing that I saw was an old-looking notebook lying around. Interesting. I reached in and picked it up, wiping a thin layer of dust off of it. It wasn't really distinctive looking. Just a plain red notebook you could probably buy anywhere. But it was the contents inside that were disconcerting. It was just pages and pages of messily scribbled nonsense. At least, that's what I thought it was at first. There was definitely a pattern in the haphazard symbols on the pages. Another language? Maybe? I didn't know. Occasionally, there would also be diagrams. These were easier to understand, but still rather cryptic. They looked like detailed outlines of a building. After a few seconds of looking it through, I came to the definitive conclusion that it was the hotel. What caught my eye was the 15th floor, which was labeled more clearly than the others. There was what looked like a staircase descending down from one of the rooms, cutting through the floor below. It didn't really show or describe where it was supposed to lead. The only word at the end of the staircase was Zone, CKX9. Now, I'm not sure how many nope situations you've been in, but this probably fit the bill. Despite that, I kept looking through the hole, just in case there was anything else. And there certainly was. With dead candles scattered all around it, there appeared to be a trapdoor. My blood kind of froze there. Was I supposed to deduce that it led to a fucking staircase? On the 15th floor? Eventually, I kind of just forced myself to laugh at it. I mean, there was no way. Right? I made a decision right then and there. I started tearing down the wall some more, just so that I had enough space to crawl through, into the hidden room. It really wasn't bigger than a walk-in closet. Unfurnished wooden floors, walls and ceilings, with that weird trapdoor in the middle. I took a moment of hesitation before opening it. I mean, if there was actually a staircase, there was no chance in hell I was going down there. I reached down and grabbed the metal handle. I searched around for a lock, but it wasn't there. I finally lifted it up, not really knowing what to expect. There was only blackness at first. And then I shined my light down. Stairs. Inexplicably, there were stairs. It shocked me so much that I instinctively closed it. I sat there for a moment, astounded. I started believing that it was just some weird illusion. With that in mind, I opened it up again and carefully stuck my hand down. Not a solid surface. They really were stairs. I spent the next few hours trying to figure out what could have been underneath my room. I asked around, did the research, and even went down a floor to see for myself. But everything yielded the same conclusion. It was just supposed to be another room. I knocked on the door of the person that I'd mapped out to be right below me, but nobody answered. I even did some research online. No similar experiences to mine. In this situation, I did the one thing that I thought was appropriate. I went to my coworker, Jacob's room, and told him about it. At first, he was a bit bothered that I was knocking on his door at 1 a.m., but I knew he'd be interested in this. He was one of those brash, paranormal aficionado guys. A bit annoying at times, but I'd say that we were friendly enough. After I'd explained the situation to him, he let out a skeptical and somewhat obnoxious laugh. He still elected to come check it out. During the walk-up, I was slightly concerned that it was going to be one of those situations where it disappears or some shit. But when we got up to my bathroom, it was still there. Still weird as ever. When I opened it up and revealed the stairs, I could see a look of sheer shock drawn across his face. I doubt he'd ever actually experienced anything paranormal before, despite the stories he always tells. This was uncharted territory for the both of us. We mused for a few more hours, deliberating on whether or not to go down. Well, it was actually just Jacob trying to convince me to go down with him. Come on. I remember him telling me. What a fucking story. For whatever reason, he was adamant about going through with this insane bullshit. Eventually, I agreed to go down like 10 steps and then right back up, just to see what was going on. We opened our flashlights and he went first. As soon as my body descended into whatever the hell this place was, I could feel the atmosphere shift around me. Hard to explain, but it wasn't like when your ears pop at high altitudes. It was something else. I went down the 10 steps that I'd promised before stopping and analyzing my surroundings. It wasn't like I could see much, though. It was just dark. Incomprehensibly dark. I watched as Jacob went further and further down. Are you sure this is a good idea? I say to him. None of this makes any sense. He goes down probably around 8 steps further than me before turning. Dude, this is crazy. You coming? Fuck that. I told him. What kind of place is this? As I say this, his expression drops. What? I asked him. Do you hear that? He responds. I strained my ears, trying to figure out what he was referring to. It was faint but, there. Water? I couldn't really tell if it sounded more like somebody was sloshing around ankle deep, or if they were flat out swimming. But it was extremely far down, causing me to wonder how deep this place was. And then Jacob did the stupidest fucking thing anybody could have done in that scenario. He yells out who's there, and in the near utter silence of this apparently massive room, it echoes like hell. It was quiet after that. Quiet. No more movement. Whatever was down there had reacted. What happened next nearly gave me a heart attack. Heavy, wet footsteps began sprinting up the stairs. They were still faint at first, but they gained at an inhuman pace. Jacob and I followed suit, scrambling the hell back up. We stumbled back into the room, closing the door behind us. As soon as we did this, the footsteps ceased again. But we didn't have peace of mind yet. There was no lock. And the door isn't so heavy. Jacob quickly lugged the coffee table through the washroom, back to the hidden room, and then placed it upside down, over the trap door. After that, we just stood there, breathless. We glanced at each other, both of our minds probably on the same page. There were still 3 days on this trip. I didn't really get much sleep that night, even with the drawer barricading the bathroom door. I kind of wish that I'd grabbed the book back there, though. Maybe I could have analyzed it further, uncovering any possible answers. But for obvious reasons, I don't think going back down there is the best idea right now.